Hello and welcome once again to Baked Beans Garage, where, gotta get that. Last time you saw me put all these wires back in, weed out a few gremlins, and get many things working again in the old brick. Today we're gonna make her a little kinder on the ears, so some sound deadening, some audio. Let's get into it. So here's what we're working with. Nothing crazy expensive or fancy, but we got SCAR 1200 watt RMS sub 8-inch. I believe it's a 400 watt RMS. We'll talk about that. It was on sale. That thing will run probably 3 of those. Kicker speakers for the front, Pioneers for the rear. We got the coaxial design, so a tweeter built right into there. Head unit, also a Pioneer. I am a fan of those. Also got the OEM one from the parts car. Gonna have that guy in the dash and then that one hidden somewhere just so she looks original. To help with the road noise and make the bass sound nicer, we got some sound deadening. This is 80 thousandths thick, something, I don't know. Butyl rubber sound deadening. This is Killmat, just a off-brand Dynamat, I guess. And the proper tool for applying it, your fingers will thank you. This is like $8, very much worth the money. Onto the sub. The only place that I found to really put it is this little cubby back here, what's covered up by this panel. And it almost kinda even almost fits. Kinda, almost. Gotta put it in at an angle. I'm gonna put it right about there. I've already started with the sub enclosure. This piece made up with the aid of some CAD, cardboard aided design, of course. And I have the front panel right here, made up from some cardboard. So we'll fire up the jigsaw, get that cut out of the contractor grade sub enclosure material, just some off-the-shelf plywood. Also want to do it like this in case I decide that the 1 8-inch is not enough, then I can add another and that amp will be perfectly fine for it. But anyway, let's cut that out. I'm going to start with the sound deadening. I'll probably do 2 layers in here just to keep that bass nice and clear. But one thing we do have to deal with is, I don't know, what would I call it, an outflow valve? I don't, that's airplane talk. Anyways, this guy. This is what keeps your ears from feeling it when you shut your door, because when all your windows are up and you shut your door, it tries to compress all the air inside the cabin, and this little guy will just boop and let that out so you don't feel it in your noggin. So I'm just gonna delete that. I'm not gonna bother welding. Just gonna seal a little panel onto there. And of course the sub wouldn't sound all that good if the entire enclosure is just covered up with a piece of plywood. So I've been to my grandma's house and took this. So that'll go in there, what for letting the bass out. And I think that'll technically make it a bandpass sub enclosure. I don't know, I'm not an audio guy, but logic says bass come out, vent, make loud. And to give that a nice finished look, I'm gonna hit it with the old Aussie sauce, what I used underneath the car. It also has a bit of a sound deadening quality, which will be nice. And while that ooh, I forgot to drill the hole. While that cures, we can start looking at the electrons dancing around. Not many good places to hide the amp back here. There's a little pocket in that side, so can't put it there. Can't put it there because the filler neck's right here. So I think I'm gonna hide it under this panel here. Which makes the wiring a little awkward to be able to get this in and out, so I think I'm gonna stand it down, up, a little bit, and I'm just gonna over-engineer the hell out of it. I'll see you when I figure all that out. So I spent way too much time thinking about this, but here's where I landed. I think it's pretty tidy, makes it accessible. Now underneath here, this is why it's stood off. All the wires are nice and clamped down real tight. Don't mess around with cable management. And got a nice service loop for running it back up the car. Now it's not ideal to run your audio signal wires with your power wire, but this is a pretty low power setup, so I don't think crosstalk is really gonna give any adverse effects. Grounding, just poked a hole right in that rail there. And as far as the speaker wires go, before I painted it, I laid a conduit in to run those wires, some more protection at those feed throughs. So like I mentioned, this amp is way overkill for this sub. That's 1200 watt RMS, that's only 600 watts. So I'm gonna have to turn it down and be careful, because that will pretty happily blow that voice coil through that window. So before I finish the routing up towards the front of the car, it's time for that part where I over-explain something. So we're going to talk about power and audio and electricity and whatnot quickly. So as you may or may not know, sound is just pressure waves. And what a speaker does is it takes an electromagnet to jiggle a permanent magnet back and forth. And that's what drives the cone. And this just acts as a piston to compress and expand the air right here to send out sound waves. That's also why sub-enclosures are important, because you can imagine if you just have that cone jiggling, those pressure waves are going to loop around and not going to throw sound out very well. It's an interesting science, how to tune subwoofer enclosures. I don't understand it. I obviously didn't do that at all. But a lot of stuff you can do with porting and chamber sizes, but that is neither here nor here. So all your amp is doing is changing this polarity in a very specific way, for changing the field on this electromagnet, which you know, drives your cone up and down. Like I said, 600 watt amp, or 600 watt sub, 1200 watt amp. Bit of a mismatch. We'll just have to turn it down. It'll be fine. It'll be fine. So the way power is calculated, of course, with DC, you just take your volts times your amps, your tension times your current, and that'll give you watts. But with AC, since it's not a direct current, we'll just use a sine wave for the sake of demonstration. In AC, your polarity is switching back and forth real quick. It's just not a direct current. Duh. So we can't use that same formula. You have to use what's called root mean squared. Don't worry, I'm not going to be drawing formulas or anything. I'm bad at math. But I do know that. And RMS, you pretty much take your peak voltage. Voltage doesn't really matter here. We're talking in amps. I don't know how many volts are flying around here. But for the sake of making the Pixies dance proper, to calculate RMS, you take your peak voltage of that sine wave, and it's roughly 0.7, and that's to compensate for like the peaks and valleys, since you can't use the DC formula. This is all approximate. I don't know what I'm talking about. Now that's a sine wave. That's what comes out of your wall when you're plugging in your soldering iron. An audio wave is kind of a mess. So the approximation of RMS doesn't work here, since you'd have to do math. I'm not going to do it. I'm just explaining it to you. So if that's all our audio wave, all RMS is pretty much calculating all of the area underneath the waves, and that's how you calculate your power. And your subs are rated based on how much of this they can take without blowing up. And another thing is, this electromagnet, that's just an inductor. Inductive capacitance is a pretty cool thing that you should Google if you're a nerd. Would recommend it. Does a lot of weird stuff. It'll tell you why bigger speakers are better for lower frequencies. That's why your little baby tweeters are going to put out your high frequencies, and you need subs for the real low ones. Not just, you know, the mechanical limitations of how fast it can jiggle that diaphragm back and forth. My approximation of a waveform here, that's what you'd see were you to plug your speaker setup into an oscilloscope. This waveform, since this is what's directly controlling the polarity of the voice coil, the control field, this is actually how your speaker cone is tracking. And another thing briefly, using that RMS formula, since we know we're feeding the amp 12 volts, we'd have to, you know, estimate how much loss it has. Nothing's 100% efficient, but that's also how we can guesstimate what kind of fuse we need, or breaker in this case. So this was probably very confusing and completely incoherent, but I have made myself feel better by thinking I have explained it. Anyways, gonna go plug the sub into the battery, hopefully make some noise this evening. And I think I forgot to mention that's just for illustration purposes. In reality, the magnet is at the base, and then the voice coil, the electromagnet, is attached to the cone. That's what you'll see. All speakers have those two little wire feed throughs there. Of course, the magnet's a lot heavier, and it would be a lot more difficult to jiggle the magnet up and down than it is the coil. So I have all its nerves run down here on the captain's side with the original harness. Now, per request of the owner, he wants the original head unit in the dash to keep it looking original, which I agree with. So that guy is going to go in there, and that's going to make some of the routing kind of convoluted and weird. Usually when I'm doing an audio harness, I like to keep it as separate as possible from the body harness, but I don't think there's any getting around just completely integrating it. So all the stuff that needs to talk to the head unit is going to go up into the center console. I'm going to have to snag all the wires. This originally had, well, when I got it, it had an aftermarket head unit, so hopefully some of this is correct. We will see. Just going to have to longen those and snip them into there. And then the power cable, what goes forward, it's like exactly long enough to get it to the battery. I'm going to use this feed through right there underneath the main body harness and run it up to right about there. I'm going to make a little bracket to use this circuit breaker instead of a fuse. That way, if you need to do work on your system, you just boop, and it's isolated. I was originally going to tap it off of the starter for keeping it more hidden, but well, first off, the wire wasn't long enough, and that's also a little more convoluted. I figured just keep the electrical bits away from the hot pieces that are going to be here. So we're going to do that. So that's all mounted up, made out of the finest aerospace grade trash can lid. Don't usually like tech screws, but they happen to work pretty well for this fiberglass reinforced plastic that the battery tray is. Also made up a lead for hooking the battery terminal into that end of the breaker. Just crimped some ends on some old sub wire I had using old reliable mutilated diagonal cutters. Now, most sub wire these days is that either straight aluminum or copper coated aluminum. You don't want to crimp that too hard because you'll end up breaking strands pretty easily. As for the rest of it, I just cut a hole in a grommet that is kind of the right size for that feed through, and then this is some heavy marine grade heat shrink, and that lets you bend it while it's hot, and it'll hold that shape for keeping it away from other obstacles on the firewall. And then I wrapped everything in just black vinyl tape, for keeping the color palette managed. Anyways, on to the head unit. So happy accident. I found out that the head unit that was in here when I got the car had the same plug that the new one uses. All I did was run the remote wire to the head unit from the sub, and then of course the audio wires. Then most head units you have to go and turn on the subwoofer function in the settings. Got it paired to my phone. I'm gonna try to upload this as it is. Probably gonna get copyright claimed, but you know, if you know the image, you know the image. And I'll just use this audio in the event that that does get copyright claimed. Here's the first royalty-free bass test that came up on YouTube. That's a working sub. Oh, and I also cut that out and put the screws in. So I'm not gonna really know how much you heard till I start editing or even upload this video, but if you heard any scragglies, that speaker is completely destroyed. I think these three are originals. This door card is missing, so I kind of just threw in the old Pioneer what's going in. Furthermore, usually I'll just run new speaker wire because it's super easy, but the speaker wires in these cars seem to be of a heavy enough gauge. I'm confident just, you know, using the existing stuff, that'll also help with cleanliness and whatnot. I didn't immediately hammer on that sub. You got to break them in. You want to run them at a real low volume with a bunch of different frequencies before you really hammer on them. I find that Find You Again by Mark Ronson featuring the Queen, Camila Cabello, is actually a pretty good song for doing that, so just run it at like a moderate volume. Anyways, that battery is probably not a fan of me at the moment, so I'm gonna go charge that up before I start doing all the wiring in here. It's really really a shame. This engine is so good, but this car is so bad. Little teaser for things to come. The engine is staying with me, the car is not. We'll get to it. And with the harness longened out for it reaching to the console, now it's just a matter of splicing back into here. I think I can manage matching the colors. Just going to use the bog standard linesman splice. Now the important thing to remember when you're doing this is you're not trying to heat the solder, you're trying to heat the wire to get it hot enough to melt the solder. And that's how you get good wicking. And now that that's all prettied up, I just used some Gorilla Glue for sticking the cage in there and then poked a hole in the bottom. So that's all wired up. I checked it, all my speakers are working. Speaking of speakers, time for the door speakers, just some generic coaxial boys here. Couldn't find much information. Apparently there's something weird about the sizing in these door speakers, but I can't imagine it's going to be that exciting. Well, that doesn't fit. So that's not going to work for obvious reasons. I have what I thought was going to be a good door card here. I think this is from a later model because the grill here is different. That doesn't fit, but it would still be an issue. I don't have the grill for this door card, but I could still see it wouldn't fit under that grill. So here I have the rear door card, which is the same style as what's in there, and there's this ring what snaps into the back, and that's where your screws go. I'm gonna try to do something. I'm gonna try to undercut the card and the foam and try to set the speaker in from the back. So we'll see what I come up with. So that was just an experiment. I'm not actually going to use this door card for obvious reasons, but that works pretty well. I think I'm just going to shoe glue it into the door card for preventing all vibrations. Just got to figure out how I'm going to mount the grill again. I also forgot to mention that the original speakers are also coaxial. Coaxial meaning you got the little tweeter in the middle of the larger diaphragm. They share an axis, hence coaxial. Same as the new rigs. Got the big speaker and the little speaker. The big speaker being a woofer, that's for your lower frequencies, and the little baby guy, that's for your high frequencies. So you have even distribution of the frequencies, and it just sounds nicer. But yeah, these are pretty nifty units back in the day. Now they're just trashed. I'd like to know who made them, but they seem to be pretty high quality. Even the foam's still soft. The paper cone has just deteriorated. And of course, this is just experimental, but I think that's how I'm going to end up mounting them. I'll do that when I address the interior. Obviously, most of it is still absent, not going to use this door card. And that leaves us with only one major piece of work left, and that is keeping the outside sounds out and the inside sounds in. So sound deadening. This is Killmat, pretty much just an off-brand Dynamat. This foil laminated butyl rubber insulation. This will turn your tin can of a car into a Rolls. This is quite the upgrade. I do it on all my projects. Now, this Killmat specifically, you may or may not be able to get in your country because of certain geopolitical happenings, but no matter. This is one of the very few times I will recommend actually getting the proper tool. These are like $6, and it makes it so much easier. Now, this just has a release film on the back, a piece of paper. All you do is lay it in, cut it, and then give it a roll. So to recap, we got all the sound deadening in. That looks quite nice. I might patch in a few more areas as I go along, like the drive shaft tunnel and a couple other places. Now, YouTube told me this track is royalty free. That better be correct. Anyways, I tacked in the rest of the speakers just for testing. Like I said, I'll address that when I go through the whole interior, because the door cards are going to need some precision mutilation to fit those in. But anyway, oh man, that drop was disappointing. Sorry everyone. But yeah, we got 4 speakers, we got a hidden head unit, we got a hidden amp, and we got a semi-hidden sub underneath Grandma's HVAC vent, but it works good. Now the factory head unit, it's over there somewhere. I tried to plug in some power to it and I couldn't get anything out of it, so I'm thinking it just needs the factory amp to actually work. I got the backlighting to work, so that'll work, but I don't think the clock or anything's gonna be able to work. No matter. This sounds quite nice. Can't really close the doors and get the full experience because this window regulator is trashed and the sunroof is absolutely hammered, but we'll get there. I think we're done. So that's all for today. I'm pretty happy with how everything came out, looking and sounding quite nice. This has been a tremendous upgrade for this car. It's never had good audio, but it'll pay dividends in the future. Please do like, subscribe, share, trying to grow the channel. I appreciate you putting up with ads. I know they're annoying, but any money I make off of those will go right back into the channel for more fun projects and higher quality videos. I have been a chinchilla, cosplaying as a functional adult. I'll see you next time.